Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where movement, mindset, and mastery meet. Join us as we explore the art of living fully with expert guests and real-life stories to inspire your journey. And welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast with your host, Brad Marshall. And today, excited to be joined by Anthony Davis. And funny enough, know of Anthony from the CrossFit space and seeing him compete. And then come to find out he lives in my neck of the woods here in North Carolina. We met on a golf course and have gotten a chance to play a little bit and catch up. So I thought it would be really fun to have you on to share a little bit about your history and story and things like that. So Anthony, thanks for spending some time with me on the podcast today.
Yeah, Brad, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm super stoked.
And like I said, I think a lot of folks in the CrossFit space probably know you as the athlete who has competed at the highest level. Folks may not know you as the golfer, which is what I didn't realize either, but it's been fun to get to know you as that. But I'm always interested and intrigued to hear people's story of how they got into fitness or how they got into coaching or what led them to where they are now. So give us a little background on how did you find your way into fitness and competing and coaching and golf and all the good stuff?
Yeah, so I would say I was probably like playing sports the second I popped out of the womb. My dad and uncle are both D1 football players. My grandfather was a PGA professional. Ever since I can remember, I got pictures of me at 2 on T-ball fields, and I've just like always grown up around sports and being active and going out and doing stuff. And so played sports my whole life. Went to high school, played 3 sports there. It's football, basketball, and golf. So it's kind of an odd combination where most people you usually see football, baseball, basketball kind of combo, but I had the golf in there. So it's kind of a mix of kind of this brute but finesse skill set. And then I didn't end up getting into the school that I was supposed to play football for. So I was kind of stuck in this like, what am I going to do now kind of world. Like I didn't think my athletics was over. I just didn't really know like where that was going to kind of go. And so I just happened to that summer, like caught wind of the CrossFit games. I want to say it was on like ESPN Plus or something. This is like 2013. I was like, this looks sick. Like, I don't know what's going on, but this looks really cool. We had done some CrossFit stuff in high school. Like I remember one of our teachers was doing like an after school thing. It was like really old school CrossFit. It was like, today we're going to go run a mile holding a 45-pound plate, or like 10 rounds of 10 burpees into a 100-meter sprint. And that was the whole workout. And so I kind of had known about this thing, and then I saw it on TV. I was like, oh, this is way cooler than I had ever thought. I went to school in Michigan, Grand Valley State, and I was just kind of working out. I knew that was what I wanted to do. I was training about 5 or 6 days a week. And I noticed these guys who kind of had CrossFit stuff. Like I saw a foam roller, I saw a PVC. They would do bar muscle ups in the rec room every once in a while. So I was like, I bet those guys do CrossFit. I didn't know who they were. And so one of them worked at the food, like in the food court where we all ate. And I was like, hey, do you do CrossFit? He's like, yeah, we do. We actually just started this strength club. We meet from 10 to midnight, 4 days a week below the gym. So I took like a month before I actually went in and did it. But I showed up. It was like 15 guys and like 4 girls. And it was just like throwing down, doing the most ridiculous kind of CrossFit stuff you could think of. And I just remember after my first day, like, this is what I want to do. And so from there, I started going to that club. I joined the club there. They were coaching at a gym about 30 minutes away. So I was driving every single day to work out here. I was cleaning the bathrooms for a discounted price. And then ultimately, some people were gone for the summer because of like college. So they're like, hey, can you help fill out some time coaching? So I started doing a few days here and there. And then fast forward, let's see, I'm 30 now, 11 years. I'm still coaching in various capacities, and here we are.
Yeah, it's like you mentioned that idea of brute and also finesse. It's nice to have that balance. When you were in high school, what did your training or working out look like? Were you someone who went to a school where you had a structured coach who was teaching you how to move and how to work out and get ready for the sports you're in? Or was it kind of go on your own and do your own thing? But what did that look like when you were first starting to kind of get acclimated to working out, especially when it comes to preparing for your sports?
Right, yeah. I mean, I was very lucky my dad kind of helped me out young. I kind of started doing some workouts when I was about 13. But then my high school, I think this is a very rare occasion, but my high school actually had sports specific hours. So like if you're a football player in the spring, you can take football for 6 hours. So it's literally 3 days of working out, 2 days of like plyo fitness, and then Fridays you just play 7-on-7 and you prepare for going into the off season. In the fall, you do the same thing for basketball. You do an hour of basketball for the last hour, and then winter, they didn't have golf. You could do baseball, but so we always had some sort of structured kind of fitness plan. I wouldn't say necessarily we had great coaching. We just had, your typical, you're going to do 3 by 8 by 12 and build throughout this time. And so um, I hit like a pretty big growth spurt my junior year. And so when I was a sophomore, I was about 5'5", maybe 150. By the end of my junior year, I was 5'9", 195. And then my senior year, I was 5'10", what I am now, like 210, 215. So I actually got really, really strong. It was always something that came pretty natural to me. I could squat 400 pounds in high school, benched 265. Nothing like crazy, but I had definitely built up a very strong foundation prior to ever doing CrossFit.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Was curious about the genetic side of the house. You mentioned coming from a family of a lot of athletes. There's some folks who I know I went when I went to high school, there was athletes who first time they moved a barbell, you were just like, wow, that is crazy how strong they are. And others who it took time and a lot of diligence to try and build strength. So it sounds like for you a combination, starting young, having the growth spurts, hitting some genetics allowed you to be pretty strong. And that's really unheard of for a golfer. But in the football world, that's pretty consistent. So what did you notice about having the strength and how that translated to golf? Because when you look at golfers, usually they're pretty lean. They've got a lot of movement that they can get into. And so how did that impact your golf game in high school?
So golf is actually the only sport I got worse throughout high school because of all of those changes. My sophomore year, I had made it to my freshman year. I made it on varsity, which is kind of like the big kind of goal and hope. And then from there, I had made it to regionals my sophomore year. And then junior year, I was really close to regionals. And then senior year, I just missed out on all conference and did not make regionals that time either because I started getting stiff. The muscles used in football are very linear and very direct. And so when you're growing in size, you're growing in range of motion, I definitely was getting more limited. My shot was changing quite a bit. I was probably a little too strong for the clubs that I was playing. So I was trying to brute my way through a sport that requires a lot of technique and a lot of position work, which honestly has always been kind of my vice when it came to CrossFit too. So it definitely played itself out that way later on as well.
Yeah, and I think that's always interesting to see what kind of sports people gravitate towards as they're growing up and hit high school or college, and how some of those things translate if they do or when they find CrossFit as an outlet. Because I've certainly noticed that as well. I as much as I enjoy golf and baseball and things like that, they don't always play so well together. Some of the things that allow you to be good at one may not set you up for the other. And so then after high school, went on to college and found that club. And when you got there, obviously having some of the foundations of being strong, being capable with a barbell and other movements would set you up for some success. What was that initial sort of process like of being with this group? You mentioned just doing really kind of hard, challenging metcons and workouts. I'm imagining there was a lot of growth that happened in that phase, but also a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I mean, we still joke about it now. My friends, Jack and Regan, they're still in CrossFit. Regan is still competing. I think he's actually competing at Wadapalooza this weekend. And we got some other guys that work in gyms and still train super hard. And I mean, it was, looking back, probably the most fun time of CrossFit. And I know a lot of people now, you're a gym owner within the last 3 or 4 years, right? Like a lot of people talk about the glory years of 2014 through 20, but very much for us, it felt that way. Everyone was kind of growing with the sport. Everyone was kind of like, had a chance, like, that the dingling of like, can I make it to regionals? Can I make it to a semifinal? Should we make a team? Like, the affiliates and everything were so much bigger in that sense of like, what gym has 6 people or what gym has these. And so like, for us, being young and being excited and growing in the sport, there's a ton of growth there because I had a lot of people who could really push me and challenge me and kind of, forge the way for me to have something to try to chase. Like a lot of people athletically, you really need someone almost there kind of pushing you. And that's the beauty of going to a class, right? Like you have your 3 or 4 people that you like. The leaderboard isn't really to compare yourself to others, but it gives you something to like, hey, are we growing in this? Are we getting better here? Are we, and those people that are kind of similar to you in that sense, like it's fun for you to be like, oh, I want to try to keep up with this person, or I'm really inspired by that person, so I want to try to catch them in a workout like this or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, it was 24/7. We were training, doing random stuff. I mean, we didn't have plans, like everyone's got a plan now. It was like, hey, this workout looks terrible. Like, let's go do it. That was kind of what we did for a long time. And so it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, in the CrossFit world, you hear this idea of variance, and I think you think back to some of those what folks would call the glory days of like you just see a great workout on .com, or a buddy would say, "Hey, just did this at this time," and you're like, "Oh, I want to go beat that," and you just show up just to throw down. And I think it's interesting to see how things have certainly evolved. Where even back then, the idea of getting coaching or working on specific movements or different skill sets within CrossFit wasn't as accessible. Where like now, there's any number of folks you can go find to help you get coached in general on very specific movements. So at that time, were you all just kind of each other's coaches, or how did you notice or see some of the progress? I imagine just doing the movements help, but were there things like, man, I really want to get better at my gymnastics or at running or at barbell? And how did you go about improving in those areas, as a club back in those days?
Yeah. And so, back then it was kind of, we were all kind of in different spots. I came into the sport very strong. I think like the first day I ever snatched, I'd snatched like 200 pounds. Like I had no idea what I was doing. And was like, I did like a set of 5 of 315 with like Nike free run 3.0s. I had never front squatted before in my life. Like it was just like, was doing all these crazy stuff. And so for me, like just attacking movements, trying to keep up with the other guys in workouts was just like kind of slowly like, can I catch up to them in a sense? And then strength wise, they were just kind of trying to lift as much as they could. And if I got a really heavy workout, I would feel like I had a chance to keep up. But it was really, from our standpoint, a lot of us really pushing each other more than coaching each other. When we decided that, like, I want to say around 2016, we started doing comp train, because that was like kind of the first real program out there that everyone had access to. It was free, it was good, it was competitive. So it gave us something, like we didn't have to come up with silly stuff anymore. It was just like, here's the plan. Every single day, go as hard as you physically can. Was really, I mean, like now people are like resting and like all this, like 80%, 90. I mean, for us back then, it was like every single day, bury yourself as hard as you can. I don't coach that way anymore, but I will say it did get us very good in a relatively short amount of time. And just being in that environment where people push you and encourage you. And I would say, like, I was pretty lucky from the beginning that I've always had incredible support through the gyms. Like the first gym I was at, Lake Effect, the owner Paul did everything in his power to really empower us and give us an opportunity to compete hard. And then when I went to Minnesota, the environment and Tony had created at Timberwolf, and then being able to coach I've always had really incredible people around me, both in the affiliate and competitively, which I think is just like creates opportunity to have a really good time with CrossFit.
Yeah, and I think something you mentioned there that stands out is that idea of how strong the community aspect is to not only push you to increase the intensity and the effort you're putting in, but to get you want to come back, because it's to bury yourself every day and then still keep coming back. There's got to be something going on there. And so when you've got other friends and buddies who are there doing the same thing, I think that's one of the reasons why people love getting into CrossFit or staying CrossFit, because they come in for whatever goals they've got, but then they realize, hey, there's a community here. There's people I can work out with. They're accountable to me. I'm accountable to them. And that helps people stay in. And so you mentioned when you first sort of found CrossFit, part of it was seeing it on ESPN and kind of hitting that competitive itch you might have had. Was that sort of the why behind you going and working out with all of them? Or was it just fun for you to just push yourself and see what you were capable of, day in and day out with that group?
For me, it was kind of like a two-way street. Like I got to be athletic and competitive again, but then two, it really gave me really good friendships and really solid place to just like embrace and become who I was and who like I really wanted to be. Like growing up, the pressures of everything else when your parents are D1 athletes or stuff like that. And I won't say that they put an incredible pressure on me. It was just something that I have always felt myself to like live up to an expectation. So CrossFit, having really no body in my life had ever done anything like that, it really offered me just an opportunity to be like, what can I put my energy and my effort into? Like, who am I going to turn out to be through this? What am I going to learn about myself through this? What do I want to achieve through this? What do I want to get out of this thing that is CrossFit? And so the competitive route just gave me kind of a target to just like, it really was like if there was a target in the middle of the water, it's just out there. And like you're throwing stuff at it and hoping maybe it would land there. I'll be honest, when I started, I didn't think it would turn out quite as good as it has for me, but it really was just an opportunity to do what it was supposed to do, which is like figure out who you're going to be and challenge yourself in ways that you never thought you could.
Yeah, that speaks a lot to that idea that when you are pushed up against something that's challenging or difficult, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn about the skills you've got and the ways you can try and overcome or work through different situations. And so CrossFit, by giving difficult, challenging workouts day in and day out, gives you a lot of opportunities to figure out who you are, who you want to be, why do you put in that energy and that effort, and then you kind of mix and match it. Like some days it's about the fun and the community and you're going in with your buddies, and other days it's because you are throwing things at that target in the middle of the water to figure out how close can you get to your own personal potential. And there's the ebbs and flows there. Was there a certain point in time when you realized that you had the skills and the ability to go to a certain achievement, if you want to call that, or certain level in CrossFit? Because like you said, at that time, there was this idea that, hey, anybody could show up and do really well in the open and maybe make it to a regional. And that was like a huge accomplishment for a gym and a community. And then when you get that far, you're like, well, maybe there's an opportunity for me to see if I can go even further than that. So what was that process like for you of going from, I like competing, this is fun, to, ooh, I'm actually pretty good at this and I have a chance to really push the envelope?
Yeah. So, when I started, regional still took 48 something people. So it was like, oh, can I get in? I remember after my second year, my third open that I did my first open like 3 months into CrossFit. No idea what I was doing. Couldn't even do a ring muscle, but I tried for like 4, 5, 6 straight minutes. And then third year was the first year I had beaten both of my friends, which for us was like, okay, he has kind of unnatural strength for the sport. So once he catches up to us fitness wise and skill wise, like my ceiling was very high because I was already super incredibly strong. So once I passed them kind of in that third open, I think I beat Regan by one spot. I kind of knew, okay, I am 20 years old now, or 21. And I kind of formulated a plan in my head of like, now I finished 133rd in the region. I was like, next year I want to break in the top 100, then the top 75. And if I do that, then I want to try to make it to regionals. Like I'll graduate school and then I'll try to make it to regionals. Well, the next year I finished 19th. And I remember before the open started, it was like, we're moving from 48 to super regionals and we're only taking 20. So I was like, oh gosh, like how the heck am I going to sneak into here? And then I ended up taking 19th. Had no idea I had gone to that level because I was just kind of growing. We were all just kind of growing with the sport. And so like you finish the first workout and you're like, oh, I'm like 15th place. And there's a strength event next. And I just finished 5th in the region. And it's like, oh, wait, like this could actually turn out really good for me. And so, yeah, 2016, I ended up making my first regional. And then after that, I went to the games on a team in 2017. And then it kind of all spiraled out of control. But yeah,
So when that moment happened of, establishing these goals, and I think a lot of us love establishing goals and surpassing it to the level that you did of like, wow, I couldn't have shortchanged myself on what my potential is or what I'm capable of. How did that change the way you either approached training or showing up? Did things stay the same, or did that all of a sudden change kind of your mindset or the way you talk to yourself around how good you are, how good you could be now that there's some like proof staring you in the face of like, oh, I was going for 100 and now I'm 19th. Like I'm in a new echelon of athletes that I haven't been in before.
Yeah, I will say the first year was very much a shock. Like, oh my gosh, I'm like with these guys, I'm like standing next to Jacob Hebner and I'm competing next to Rich Froning or he's there. He was on team at that point, but like all these like Sam Dancer, like I'm like, these guys are like legit and I'm right here next to them. And I remember going back home and being like, I went from being like another one of the people to now I was kind of the target, like people are trying to beat me in workouts now. And then that was like kind of exciting for me because it was like, can I stay ahead of? And so I started to really believe, and I would say 2016 and 2017, I definitely believed I had the skills and the abilities to perform very, very well. Looking back, I think both of those years also worked out really well in my favor. That I didn't really notice that until 2018 had come and had really exposed me in that way, which kind of like showed me a different side to all of it. And I think the other hard part for me, and kind of something I would tell to anyone now like trying to get into it, like you have to like appreciate your gift in that. Like growing up, I grew up in a pretty small town. There's like 8,000 people total. So there's a lot of politics and stuff around the sports that we play. And so like I had kind of had I want to say identity, but I was kind of known for being almost cocky or arrogant. And when you're in a situation where you're kind of, other kids' parents are the ones running the teams and you kind of like, you can be kind of perceived a certain way. And so for me, I had always kind of like felt guilty about being good. Like when I would think about like, hey, my friends are like, these are the guys that helped me get here. And then like being like, oh my gosh, now I'm the regional athlete and I get to go and do this and do all of that. And my friends don't get to do that with me. and almost like feeling weird or feeling like I can't like fully celebrate because like I kind of feel bad that I somehow have this gift that other people don't. Um and so I didn't notice how much that affected me until kind of later on in life, like a little bit more in the last few years. But I would definitely say there was like I never wanted to be perceived as arrogant because I kind of grew up being thought of that way. So I always tried to kind of like hide kind of who I was or kind of my gifts in that sense. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's interesting because we all have this idea of how we're able to compete at our best. Like when you step on the floor, like what is the mindset? What's the attitude? What's the approach that just you want to take? And we can see how different athletes have very different mindsets and attitudes that allow them to access all the training that they've, accrued. And having that mindset of, hey, I want to enjoy and appreciate all the things that are going on at the same time, really don't want to be perceived a certain way, probably has you stepping on the floor and competing, in different ways than maybe feels natural or authentic to you. And I think it's always fascinating to watch how athletes do that, which makes me wonder when it comes to you and you stepping out on the floor, is there sort of a mindset, an attitude, an approach that you were like, this is how I am, or this is how I compete at my best when it comes to me walking out on that floor?
yeah, I mean, if you could look back, you could definitely tell the times I was having the most fun. Like before I had ever gotten to a level that people had seen, like now if you were to watch me, people would probably be like, he's very reserved. He looks very like content, very appreciative. And that is very much where I've been at the last 5 years. When I was starting, I mean, we have the music blasting. I mean, like every single lift, I'm screaming. I'm punching stuff up. I'm cheering. I'm like Tiger Woods hitting that putt in 2009 with the like, and that was me all day, every day, like authentic, loud, crazy, kind of just like I'm going wild because like I just felt so much freedom when I was in the gym, and before I was anything even remotely known, like I felt like I could just do that. As things got bigger, I remember being like, I don't like, can I scream and shout and cheer like I do at home, or is that going to be like people think this guy's insane? And I definitely let what I thought people would think about me kind of influence a lot of those things, which kind of goes back to the beginning of just like the beauty of the affiliates, man, is like you're all the person, right? Like everyone knows like who, I'm just gonna say random names. Like if you're the Matt or you're the AJ or you're the Susan or you're that in the gym, like people know that and they appreciate that about you because like you're just being who you are. And so I think for myself, as I've grown, like early on, I was just really loud and excited because that's how the sport felt for me. And then as you look at my maybe career at the end, you can tell my appreciation for just being there and my appreciation for being able to do the things that I do because I had stepped away for several years from competitive CrossFit. So when I returned back in 21, it was a much different mindset going into the sport and just learning to enjoy competing again.
Yeah. And I think there's so much to be said there about learning yourself, how you operate at your best, and also being able to identify and have awareness around the things that are either holding you back or not allowing you to access all of the training and skills you have. And that concept you just highlighted there of our fear of other people's opinions, it is one of the most debilitating things, regardless of in the gym, in work, in your personal life. We get really bogged down. To me, what's everybody going to think? And if they're going to construe me in a bad light, then I'm not going to share, or I'm not going to go for it. And that can be really frustrating, and it makes you feel like you're a little bit more reserved. So even early on, it sounds like you almost don't even know what you don't know. So you can be loud and you can be excited and have a lot of fun and access all of that. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, there's a lot of
talking heads and social media and this and that, and like I'm listening or I'm seeing what they're saying or commenting, and now all of a sudden I'm changing who I am. And that doesn't always lead to the same level of success maybe that you had when it was just fun and you just got to throw down with your buddies.
Yeah, and it weighs on you a little bit because, like, I don't know, I cannot think of any reason why you would want to be competitive if you don't enjoy just doing it as hard as you possibly can. I mean, the sport itself is so demanding, it's so time consuming, and it is so hard to be successful in that, like, I mean, I just would remember times just being like, dude, I don't want to work out for 4 hours today. You know, like, I don't. And I don't want to do another wall ball. I don't want to do 45 minutes of rowing today. I don't want to, like, you just, if when you get out of tapping into why that's super fun for you, it's just, I don't even know how you could do that day in and day out if you don't enjoy it. And that's what I always go back to the gym because like I've been a coach for 11 years and I've been in and out of affiliates for 11 years. And, going back to just being in the gym, like you can make that 1 hour as fun as you want and those 30 minutes before and after as fun as you want. And it's something that, like, when you get out of that to start chasing the athletic dream, it can be tiring and it can be really lonely, especially when you've done it for so long. Later on in my career, I mean, most of my time is spent when classes aren't going on because, when you're the head coach or managing the gym and you're on the floor most of the time, I don't have time to work out with other people. So I'm training by myself a lot of times, or I'm in the off hours and nobody's out and around. And then by the time people show up, it's either I'm on the floor or it's just, it can be lonely. It can be time consuming. It can wear down on you if it's not the most fun thing for you to do. And not that it always should be, but like I heard somebody talk about this the other day. Like, you look back at the best times of your life and you always remember like the highlights. But like oftentimes we forget how difficult all of that was when we were doing it. They were talking specifically about parenting. Like, they're like, one of their kids is like about to graduate high school and they're just like, I just remember when you were so young and like when you were just a baby and how amazing that time was. But then like you think about any parent and you're like, what you mean when I don't sleep, the kid's crying or crapping everywhere, like it's the hardest time of our entire lives, but yet you remember it in such a beautiful way. And so when I think back to my early time, is like I had so much fun that the pain of what I was going through to be successful really didn't matter, because that was almost the joy of it, was like, how hard can I push? And that was really fun for me. Now 11 years later, that is not as fun as it used to be. So I definitely CrossFit a little bit different now, but I still have fun. I'm getting back to having fun.
That's what I find a lot of too in a member's journey is there's a fun that they experience when they first come in and get into the community and get into working out. And then, life happens, there's ebbs and flows. And when you find your way out of that fun sort of avenue and it feels like a chore and it feels like work, it makes it really hard to show up as consistently as you'd like to see whatever the results are, whether it's health and wellness, whether it's competitive, whatever that might be. And what's interesting is what you said too, is the career over a decade of being in fitness. And there was at this stage now 8-9 years ago of looking at moving into regionals, getting into the level of the games, hiatus, getting back into things. Talk to us a little bit about what life looked like in those 2018, 21, 22 type of years. Cause now it's like, okay, I've tasted regionals, I've tasted the games on a team. Sustainability, what would that look like for you during that stretch then? Is it just like, hey, we just keep doing the same thing year after year and I still enjoyed it to some extent? Or, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have like the unique story because so 2018 was like catastrophic. Like, so I had just finished fifth in the world in 2017 in the open. And so but I had already moved to Minnesota. I committed to a team that year, went there. But now my whole life is growing even bigger, because now people at CrossFit are like, oh, Anthony Davis might be the next guy competing at the top of the sport. And so in my head, that's where I'm going. And, and I'm about to go to the games, and I don't have the pressure of competing by myself anymore because I have a really solid team. And then I go back home. I moved back to Michigan. I started with like a coach. I never had my own individual coach. So now like my life really does look all different. And I would actually say I was the most fit I had ever been, but I had never in my entire life been positioned to be like that successful. And I've also have never failed at anything that big in my life. And so I missed the regionals by one place. And so after that, it was like, no, like, wait, all right, I just went from being like top 10 in the world in the open to now I'm not even going to go to the next stage. And now I'm here training at this gym by myself. Most of my friends have left and moved on because I took half a year off of school. So now my core people have all moved on and done stuff with their life. I didn't make this, so I don't really know what I'm training for now. Am I going to train for the next year? I had other things in my life that kind of flipped and changed. And so it was really hard, like mentally, because I was like, wow, I have just experienced catastrophic failure, which is like crazy, right? Like in the world for most people, like I'm not dealing with anything crazy. It's like I'm just not competing in CrossFit for a year. But for myself at that time and the energy and effort I had put into it, like for me, I didn't really know what to do, and I was still 22 years old, so I was still really young. And later on, I just kind of kept training, but was kind of like losing my love for it. And then I made it to Granite Games. I didn't even want to compete, but I ended up showing up, and it actually went overall well. And this is like kind of the part where I was talking about like learning to appreciate your gifts. Like at that time I had snatched 325, which was the new record in CrossFit, like in a competition. It was very exhilarating. Now, handstands have always been my vice. Handstands, specifically handstand walking, is what kept me from making regionals that year. And then handstands kept me off the podium at that Granite Games. And like Brent Fikowski's here. Street Horner at the time was a games athlete. So I'm like, these are good people to be in company with. And I was sitting on the podium, and then I fell off because of handstands again. So I literally remember I had won a barbell for that, grabbed my barbell and immediately left. I wanted nothing to do with CrossFit. I was so angry, so mad that I was not on the podium because of this stupid movement again. So I ended up quitting CrossFit, and I did an Olympic weightlifting meet, ended up qualifying for nationals on my first meet, won the Arnold in weightlifting, went on to be a silver medalist at nationals in 2019 for weightlifting, and then COVID hit. So then everything shifted back. And then in that time, my wife had started going to the gym in Minnesota. We had met online, and then just as going back and forth, and like now COVID's happening and we're not like, it's nothing to do. I was doing more CrossFit again just to kind of stay sane and be around people. And she was kind of the first one to be like, I think you still really like CrossFit, and encouraged me to start training again. So I had reached out to an old coach of mine, and he had accepted to help me out, which was Nick Fowler. And so we competed at semis in 21, 22, and 23. And yeah, it was like, so it's kind of weird. That time in between was just like learning how to deal with like really extreme failure. And I don't know if I handled it the best because I obviously quit and went and found something else that was more easy or natural to me. But I think learning to return back to the thing that scares you most, and, still showing up and still trying to do your best in the face of knowing that, it might not work out. And I think that was the hardest part for me. Was in CrossFit, I had seen a future that could work out, and I definitely saw myself as a top athlete. I mean, if you look at several of the Granite Games where I didn't make the games, I have 4 top 10 finishes, sometimes 3 top 5 finishes. If I didn't have to do handstands, I think I could have been one of the best CrossFit athletes ever. That's how I felt about my skill set, but knowing that that's a part of the game, and I did everything I could to try to get better at those things. It still doesn't really work out that way, but I think 21, 22, and 23, I really had fun doing CrossFit again and just trying to show myself that like I did belong out there. I could compete and I could do it in a different way, because beforehand I had so much pressure on myself and it was all about succeeding. And then after that, it was about, representing my family, representing myself, having fun and showing people like you can go out there and enjoy this thing. And that's what we did.
Yeah, this idea of expectations, of outcomes, of achievements, of the journey, it's really challenging and difficult conversations to have, regardless of what your goals are. We always have that thing we're working towards, whether it's a podium, whether it's weight loss, whether it's the job, whatever it might be. And if we put too much into those expectations, it can really kind of tarnish the journey of what it looks like to get there, or if we never get there. And so I find myself even going back and forth all the time of like, is it about the journey and the training and the workouts and who you meet and how you show up? Or is it about where you get to when you get a chance to put it on the line, being in the podium, being at the games, whatever it might be? So it sounds like that was a battle that you were kind of facing as well, of like the expectations and the achievement that you were striving for really meant something to you. And when it didn't go the way you wanted, I mean, that's hard to come face to face with, in your words, the idea of like a catastrophic failure.
Yeah. And I think, for a long time, that was my biggest fear, is that like I had done super well in 2017. So I had the opportunity to prove myself, but I didn't have the opportunity to test myself, which was the unique aspect of that, right? Like individually I showed I was capable of it, but I never really tested myself because I never had to go through regionals or go to the games to see like, do I have all of the pieces? So my expectation was just that this is just what it's going to be. I mean, everyone was just talking about it like, oh, he's going to the games. Oh, he's going to the games. And then, the fear itself, I think oftentimes our fears become realities because we allow them to, right? Like my biggest fear was like, what if I don't make it to the games? What are all these people going to think about me? And it's a really, it's a really poor way to look at anything, is like, how are all these people going to respond to me? And I think, that goes back to me earlier talking about the guilt of your gift. Like in my head, I was telling myself, like, if I don't make it to the games, I am disappointing every single person that has supported me up until this point, which is the absolute biggest lie of all time. Like these people love you and these people care about you. And that's what the community does. Like in the gyms, like those people love you. Those people care about you. Those people want the best for you. Every single one of those coaches loves you. They care about you. They want the best for you. And sometimes things don't work out. I don't like Tom Brady because I'm a Dolphins fan, but like no other quarterback's probably going to win 7 Super Bowls. It's probably just not going to happen, right? But if you have the expectation that like if you're not better than Tom Brady, then you've wasted your entire career, that's a dumb way to look at it, right? Like, and that was kind of the trap I had found myself in for a long time. And so I had to really learn, like, when I'm out there, like, go show the people who are here to support me that like you actually enjoy being out there and you enjoy doing this, because that's what they want to see. They want to see that when you show up, whether that's in life, whether that's at work, whether that's in your family and your marriage, that like you care about the things in your life and you care about what you're doing. And that's what people support. And so that was kind of what I've learned throughout this whole kind of CrossFit journey, of like the community side really makes sense to me. And it has always made sense to me. It's always what drove me. It's always what's I feel like lifted me up in the hardest of times. And it's something I'm very appreciative of, even 11 years in.
Yeah, it reminds me of, this idea of when we typically look at moments, experiences, or challenges in front of us, we get to sort of perceive it in one of two ways. We can see it as a threat of something that, like you said, is like, oh, if I don't do this the way I'd like to, people might say a certain thing about me. They might think a certain thing about me. I might look at myself as a failure. I don't know if I have what it takes. So we can see something as a threat, or we can see it as an opportunity of, hey, I've done everything I can. Let's go have fun. Let's put it on the line, and we'll let the cards fall where they do. And, when you typically look at situations as opportunities, as challenges, regardless of how the outcome goes, the process, the way we experience it typically goes so much better. And we end up typically performing better as well. And it's almost like you had to learn that kind of the hard way there in those middle years, where then in 21, 22, 23, you got to experience that of like, yeah, this is what it's like to have some joy on the floor and have some fun and let it rip, because you got nothing to lose and you're operating from a place of enjoyment.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so CrossFit, now looks a little different for you these days. How does CrossFit play a role? I know you've done some pretty incredible physical challenges with some endurance races and things like that. I know you love golfing and whatnot now. So how does fitness play a role in your life? So I always think it's interesting when we join CrossFit. Sometimes we go down the competitive route, we pull back from that. So what does life look like these days for you when it comes to fitness and CrossFit and all that?
Yeah, last year was kind of crazy for me. My wife and I, we just moved to North Carolina while she pursues medical school. And so I knew for myself the competitive thing was out the window, at least for a year, while I kind of figured out where we're going to be and what life down there looks like. And I've just kind of noticed I haven't been training quite as hard. And I think that's a good thing. I found, like you said, I've always been kind of a chaotic challenge chaser. So we did a 50K in May, and I ran my first road marathon in September. And so those are kind of key things for me to kind of target out. I kind of found myself just moving a lot slower, doing more kind of balance work, kind of strengthening my joints and things like that. I always joke because I'm only 30 years old, but my body feels like it's 50, just from all of the training I had done prior. That like pushing super hard definitely takes its toll on me a little bit more. And so now that I golf a lot, I'm kind of trying to just hit, 3 to 4 kind of workouts a week that are just kind of tendon based strengthening stuff. And then my wife and I will do a WOD or something together at the gym and just kind of throw stuff in. Hit some Oli lifts every once in a while, but I'm not really on a standard program. I think I'm kind of back to an old mindset with it, where it's like, all right, today I might go walk on the course. I'm going to walk 7.5 miles when I play today. Tomorrow I'm going to do a little bit of strength stuff and I'll ride my bike for 40 minutes or something. Just kind of move and kind of sweat and just kind of like enjoy fitness and just make it a part of what is the day. And like, when you look at what CrossFit is, right, it's just fitness and wherever you apply it. And so if that's, cutting logs outside, or if that's moving things in your home, or if that's doing power cleans or an AMRAP, or going for a run or going for a ruck or climbing out of a pool, it's just like however you want to apply fitness is kind of the way it is. And so it's finding people around me that I can reach out to do fun stuff and express myself in different ways and learn to enjoy slowing down a bit.
Yeah, I love hearing the story of how there are ebbs and flows to your own fitness journey, and there's different goals, and it's okay. You can do different types of workouts and different types of training to support the things that are most enjoyable and most exciting to you in the moment, and having fun with just fitness as a lifestyle versus I need to do fitness to get better at fitness. That might be one journey or timeline of your life. And then there's another where it's like, well, I like doing all these other fun things that allow me to express what I'm capable of. And so having those ebbs and flows, and no slouch on the strength. I saw one of the goals snatching 300, and that still is in the tank there for you, even at this stage. So that's fun to see that even though you take a little break from it, some of those strengths gains that you've had over the years still accessible, when you like them to be.
Yeah. I was like, all right, well, I guess I got to find something else to do now. So I have some big golf goals for myself this year, and so that's kind of a lot of where my focus and attention is kind of going. And it's a very interesting sport in that sense, because in like CrossFit, there's a million things you need to be working on and a million things that need to go right for you to be essentially successful in it. But a lot of it is focus and attention and intention. And so you're expressing very powerful, very coordinated movement into a very concise and a very intentional space. And so it's interesting how the way that I kind of train now, like I still do, some Ollie lifts here and there, because if I want to be explosive and long distance wise off of the tee, but then I'm doing these kind of slowed down, kind of not monotonous, but just very intentional movements and holds and stuff like that, and how that translates to just being in control of myself when I'm trying to be close around the greens, or if I'm putting. And do I keep my cardio up to just like be able to breathe through stuff? I'm not getting anxious about good shots. I'm not getting nervous when I get to playing really well and I want to keep it up. It's training my body and my nervous system to be regulated and to be in control when I'm out there. And so it's a very different looking thing than the last 5 years have been for me, but it's been fun to see it and have somewhere to apply it. I think that's probably what burns people out the most, is that when you're training fitness and you're training CrossFit, like you need to have somewhere where that CrossFit is being applied outward. Because when you look at what CrossFit is, it's a lifestyle, right? The hierarchy of needs, and like the top of it is sport, but all of those are habits that build expression. So like if you're not training to be a competitive athlete, what are you trying to express in your life? And for some people that might be like at your jobs, like being energized and being a good leader and being a good teammate and being something like that, or the parents at home, or maybe that energizes you to be a really good friend, and going to the gym draws you to people and encourages you to reach out to others. And I think there's so many beautiful benefits to what fitness can do for our lifestyles, but you have to have somewhere that it's expressing to, or else you feel like, what's the point of what I'm doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a strong way to, bring a close to everything that you've experienced and you've gone through over the years of as an athlete, and then finding CrossFit and pursuing those goals and learning so much about community and how you show up and the journey and the process, and having expectations and wanting to perform well. And what do we do when things go right or wrong there? And now, even at this stage of your career, finding new and fun ways to move and be fit, because it allows you to express all the great stuff outside of just being in the gym. And so I know you're still a coach and still help out. So for anyone out there who's interested in either connecting or seeing what you're up to these days, what are some of the best places that people can find you?
Instagram's probably the easiest, _Anthony Davis 34. I'll be honest, the last year and a half, I've been awful at posting anything. I do have my own fitness program called Mercy Athletics that I coach and do stuff on as well. Also, I'm terrible at posting on that too. So if you message me on either of those things, I'll probably reply, but I don't typically spend a whole lot of time posting stuff now. I currently work at Keith Hill's golf course, and I'm working on some fun golf related fitness stuff is kind of in the works underneath. And so that's something you're interested in too. You could look me up there or come hang out and play. I'd love to bring you guys out.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for taking some time. It's funny that our paths crossed on the driving range of Keith Hill's golf course. And now I've gotten a chance to get to know you a little bit better and play together, and excited to see what's next for you and how this year unfolds with your golf game and how that works out. So thanks for taking some time today, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me, man.